Hello, I'm here now. Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Moore. I'm Associate Director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And how many people received an individual invitation from Lance today? Okay. So Lance emailed a lot of people. He's been working really hard along with the rest of the group to keep in communication with several and with faculty on this topic of student engagement. I'm really excited about today's panel. I am basically going to hand the beginning over to them. I think we'll have Meredith and Red introduce themselves, and then we'll have Lance introduce himself and kind of give a summary of what the group has been doing, survey data that they've collected, and some highlights there. And when you want it to be displayed up there, just tell us. Okay. All right, let's go ahead.
All right, hi everybody. Thanks for coming along. So my name is Meredith Ferguson. My pronunciation her. I'm a third year student here at Oakland studying human resource management and sociology. My involvement with OUSC is that I'm the third person for the Student Activities Funding Board. So I'm an executive board member at the Student Congress. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm excited to be a part of this task force. My parents are both educators, so teaching and learning has been really important in my life personally. So I'm excited to see it carry over.
Hi, everybody. My name is Red Douglas. I'm a third-year doctoral student in Ed Leadership over at the Department of Organizational Leadership. I am a graduate assistant for the Oakland University Writing Center, and I'm also currently serving as the Oakland University Board of Trustees Student Liaison.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lance Markowitz. I'm a junior this year, and I started the Student Engagement Task Force in November. And it kind of started from feeling like I was falling behind in my classes, and like I just wasn't really absorbing the material. I started to notice that I didn't care anymore, which was like, that was like a real trigger for me, because like I've always been an academic. I've always loved learning. And so I was like, okay, like I need to do something about this. There needs to be a conversation. And so I founded the task force and quickly grew it to right around like 7, 8 active members with some other people in the Student Congress that would pop in every once in a while. And so as part of the initiatives that I've been working on, one of them, which I think I emailed everybody about, was the student questionnaire. And so we got right around 560 responses from that. I just went like crazy asking as many people as I could. It had about 10 questions on it. And of course, there's tons of data that still needs to be kind of broken down. But I did get some kind of fast facts compiled that if you want to throw the slide up there. I think the main thing to take away from it is that if you notice, freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors, all of them were in the 40% of the percentage of students that look forward to half their classes or less. And so obviously, the number one priority is to learn, but I think that students should be enjoying their learning. I think everybody here agrees that learning can be fun and should be fun. And so obviously, I think that's a big number that I'm working to try and reduce, so that more students are excited to go to their classes. The other one down there is we gave a bunch of different teaching techniques that are commonly used, and asked students which ones they find engaging, and they could select as many or as few as they wanted. And so 72.8% of students selected review games like Kahoot as things that get them engaged. I know for me personally, if I'm kind of tuning it out in the class and all of a sudden I hear a teacher say, yeah, we're gonna play Kahoot, and it's like, ooh, like I'm right in it, and I'm winning it. So some of the other popular answers include like voluntary question asking, partner group work, and full class discussions. And also I thought it was really interesting seeing the discrepancy between just lecturing with a PowerPoint and lecturing with in-class problems. There was about a 25% point gap between students preferring to hear their lectures from class problems. So I think that that's some valuable feedback that can be taken away. In addition to the questionnaire, I was able to speak at the faculty senate just to kind of get the ball rolling with that, and get the word out there that we want dialogue. We want to be able to all work on this together. It's not a matter of students versus teachers or versus admin or anything like that. It's all of us. We're all on the same team, and obviously, we all have the same goal in mind.
Great. So before we get into some questions, are there any, would you like to address any questions with anything that Lance said about the survey, about the work he's been doing, anything like that? Yep.
So first, great job. Secondly, what department are you in? I don't know if you mentioned that.
I did not, I'm business.
Business, okay. And third, what was the student population here? Was it random that you like you're targeting certain students in certain schools or college?
A good question. So, so I did do, I think about 130 or so of those people are from just going up to every single table in the OC and asking them to do it. The vast majority, I would say, are from Snapchat. So what I did is I joined every single Snapchat story, and so it's like the seniors have their own one, and I added every single person and then messaged them to try and get them to do it. And so because I did it that way, looking at kind of the breakdown, it's pretty even for freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. The only group that was relatively underrepresented was graduate students, with only about 30 out of the 560 being graduate students.
We're not on Snapchat. We did try to push some through. I got a hold of Dr. Julia Smith over in Ed Leadership, and she was helping me try to get some of the survey pushed through to a few more people. But yeah, I would definitely say it was a good sample.
So there is a question from online asking about whether or not you have a subject breakdown for the numbers, because we asked maybe the major of the students or not.
Yeah, so I did ask the major. That was one of the things that we honestly just didn't get time to break it down. We tried our best to just kind of break it down by year, and then it did have department college on there. But yeah, we weren't able to break it down.
Yeah, awesome. That'd be really interesting to see too.
I'm curious to know if the level or percentage of class attendance, participation, et cetera, is equal to attendance, participation, events on campus. Is it just across the board, or is it only in classrooms?
You mean just as far as our people participating in clubs and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Kind of speak to that a little bit. I mean, we didn't measure it in the survey necessarily, but in working with student organizations and being a part of several myself, I have noticed, and others have noticed as well, that attendance for even like social organizations is going pretty far down from what it has done in the past semester or so. So that is a little bit disappointing to see, but it also kind of speaks to this broader issue that all of us are experiencing in some fashion, that engagement overall is kind of adverse.
So as a representative of a lot of organizations, including the student program board, I know a lot of students that come to events on campus, even skip their classes to come to events on campus because they are more engaged in the events that are happening around campus than their actual classes. They're willing to take a day off or several days off to go and do other things with their time.
But you use therapy dogs, I'm just saying.
Can we nudge the camera a little bit that way? Introduce our last panelist.
Hi, how's it going? Amir Mitchell. I'm a freshman. I'm actively involved at Oakland University. Since the summer, I joined Student Congress, and I'm also involved in things such as organizations, Greek life. I'm kind of all on the board. So, Lance came to me with the Student Engagement Task Force a few months ago, and it definitely spoke to me because I'm definitely interested in how we can get our students more engaged, and how we can have a more active campus. As students, you would think that we wouldn't care, but I think we care as much as the teachers, that we want an immersive experience.
Okay, I think we'll dive into some questions, because time will be a challenge, but we will get there. So you don't necessarily all have to answer this question, but if you have something you'd like to share, maybe just a quick hand raise so we can know that you'd like to go next. So why should professors regularly gain input from students?
So I think something that's important to keep in mind is that every class is going to be different. And so not only are we looking at changes over time and patterns in that way, but every time you show up to a classroom, the composition is going to be different, even day to day. And so just looking at who's in your class, what their needs are, and kind of being willing to adapt to that is really great. So just kind of an awareness of not only by class and by student, but also kind of being in tune with how needs are changing over time. Like obviously a big one is the pandemic and online learning, but even within that, like there's lots of different variations as to what is working and what doesn't, based off of, especially the given technology at the time, there's all kinds of resources out there now. So kind of being adaptable to the environment and what the needs are and what the resources are to fill those needs.
I would piggyback off that too. I think we're in a good environment to talk about UDL. I see some posters on the board here and Settle that are on that topic, but thinking about the compositional changes, even from class to class, I think that taking stock of if what you're trying to deliver to the students, by taking stock of that more frequently, you're understanding if your tools of delivery are working. And it's gonna be different from person to person. There's always gonna be somebody who maybe this style doesn't work for them, we know that. But I think that in the long run, by using more multimodal delivery, you're able to get through to more people at any given time. And also, there's more ways for students to demonstrate their understanding of the material that you're seeking to deliver. When we do that, people feel inclusion, they feel belonging, they feel like they can get their point or their thought out using different tools, they feel more engaged, and therefore I think that we see an increase in learning outcomes. That's why we're here today, to talk about engagement. But I think that starts with understanding that all people are going to learn a little bit differently. There's patterns, we might be able to group people into broad categories, but like fingerprints, we're all unique and we all learn things differently. And so by continually taking stock of the composition of your class and whether or not the mediums that you're using are working, you can pivot at any time and figure out something else and see if the delivery will be better or more well received.
Yeah, I think I'll also jump in there too. I think like in meeting with a bunch of different faculty on campus, like one of the thoughts that I heard, which is definitely something that I want to address, is kind of like, why should we listen to students on this? Like we've gone to college, like we've been there, we've done that. Like, why should we be listening to a bunch of students telling us how to teach? Which of course, we're not telling anybody how to teach. That's not at all what this is about. But I think it's an important sentiment to address because I think that a lot of professors are noticing that it just seems like their students don't care. Obviously, you know, I express that sentiment in some of my classes, which is frustrating. And I think that one of the easiest ways to get students to care is to make them feel like you care. And so obviously building a rapport with them, using jokes, getting them involved in class. Those are great strategies to kind of bring students back in. And I think that, you know, obviously I want learning to be more fun for students, but I also want it to be more fun for faculty.
We do have a question. Alexander?
I would like to clarify a little bit if possible, when we're talking about the composition of the class, which aspects of that do we mean? Thank you.
Perhaps say more on what you mean the composition of the class.
I might have misunderstood the question.
So I asked, when we're talking about the class's composition, what exactly do we mean?
I would say
What are the factors we're looking into?
the way that I was interpreting that, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but I was interpreting when I said composition, I meant the people who are physically in attendance that day, and that could change from day to day, depending on the size of the class. I know that a bit of a bias from the graduate level, we tend to have smaller classes, and with many of them being a seminar style, it will be noticed if you're missing, and let's say a classroom group of maybe 10 or 12. But at the undergraduate level with these folks, especially in some of the lower survey level classes, if there's 200 people, you're just a number in the class. So we don't know at any given time, maybe 70% of people are attending that class every Tuesday and Thursday, but it's not the same 70% every time. It's going to be different week to week. So that's how I was interpreting it when I said it, composition, to clarify.
And to add to that a little bit, observing that, what do you think we can elicit from that information?
maybe just like the different responses to like all of the teaching methods that you're using. So if you're noticing that maybe in this one particular session of this class, the group is kind of low energy and not really responsive to a long lecture or this specific exercise or activity that you've chosen. If you're noticing that this class isn't responsive to that, it might be a good thing to notice that this session is different from maybe other sessions that you taught in this class, or the different group of students that's chosen to show up that day. And just kind of having that awareness and like that thermometer almost in your classroom to be able to see like what's being responded to in real time.
Yeah, to go off of that as well, I think that getting student feedback is essential to kind of understanding what that composition looks like. And so, and that also pairs with rapport as well, that if you're having like a little Google Forms or something that, you know, all your students are filling out about, you know, what they want to accomplish with this class, what's one thing they want to learn with this class, or even if it's just like a one question, you know, one day or something, so you can get a feel for where your students are at. I think that's a good way to kind of be able to assess things, because, you know, sure, on a just a normal day, it's kind of hard to look out at 150 students and know exactly what's going on in, you know, each of their lives.
I know when I was graduate teaching assistant for the HC 1000 courses over at the Honors College, large courses. I had an occasion to guest speak in front of lecture and do a guest lecture in front of the total class and some, the large amount of kids in the stadium seating over here in Barner, how they used to be. I will say I would much rather do that and look out at a room full of people and be able to read the room than look at a bunch of screens and feel like I'm talking to myself. But so I will say that this is probably more conducive to a face-to-face environment. But what I would do is I would have in my slide deck every few slides an activity, a video, something. And then if I was looking out and I was losing people by just me talking, or, you know, my slide deck wasn't engaging enough, and I seen everybody doing this, or, you know, doing this, or I would get to that slide and say, okay, we're gonna switch it up. Let's watch a movie now. Let's talk about something. Let's do something else. If everything was engaging and everything was going smooth, we can always skip over that slide in the deck. We don't have to go that route if it's going smoothly, but at least you have that inbuilt in as a plan B. So, you know, you're looking, you know, kind of scanning across the room and you're losing people. There's something there to switch it up. Like, let's move around, get into groups. Let's watch this video really quick. Just something to get them out of the monotony and the routine of just talking at them. So that's one tip or trick that I've used in the past.
So it's just a last comment on that. Our office on our teaching blog, Sarah recently wrote something about a who's in class form. So if you wanted to know at the beginning of a course, like what grade level are they at, or what ranking are they at? If you want to ask things about their major and other things, that's where you can get a breakdown of composition if that informs, you know, how you might do things, what sort of flexible structures you might offer, preferences and use of technology and things like that. So that's good for the beginning. But yes, I would agree that that's not just a one and done thing, but getting regular feedback, even if it's 1 or 2 questions.
I had a question. I like to think that I'm one of those faculty and my colleagues. I mean, there are 2 that are able to read the room and understand how composition, delivery, et cetera, tailored for every instance of instruction. But I've noticed a growing number of students, in my opinion, that just aren't ready for the university learning experience. Are you working with FIAC, First Year Advising Center, or admissions to better prepare them for, you know, students, just to give them information that they can pass on to students so that they're not overwhelmed, student, not by it.
Both,
Yeah.
We've been seeing that increasingly at the Writing Center. And one of the things that the director had told me was, well, these kids only went to 2 years of high school. What do you mean? Well, two of them, they were remote, and who knows what the oversight was, if they were attending class, or if the parents were making a movie assignments or whatever, right? So I think that that's just across the board, something that higher ed's gonna be dealing with. And the fact that we're at a 4-year institution that doesn't offer a ton of remedial options, that we would kind of think of, and just the trend that's been kind of pushed off to the community college sector in the last several decades. But I think that that's not unique to us. And no, we had not thought about reaching out to FIAC, but that's a good lead.
Let's move on to the next question, that gives us maybe a concrete example of what is working. So when is a time where you were struggling to focus in class and your professor did something that got you to re-engage class? So everyone maybe feel free to share something.
Yeah, I have an example. A few weeks ago, I was in class and, you know, this is sort of a class where a lot of it is based off of interpretation. And so if you are not engaged, you're kind of just going to zone out and it just sounds like words. But I'll say one thing that my professor did that was pretty excellent. He saw, you know, he read the room, he saw that visual energy, and he just randomly just started speaking louder and more empathetic, like towards us. And it just kind of, you could see like the lights almost kind of brighten up a little bit. And just piggybacking off of what Lance and Maris said earlier, when you show your students that this topic means something to me and that I have a passion for this, and you are speaking in a tone that they can pick up on, you will be surprised by the amount of people that would be interested and would be willing to learn more, you know, and then they might discover that passion. So I think as professors and educators, I think the biggest thing you can do is light that spark in students and to, you know, kind of inspire them to find those areas in their mind that they didn't know was there. It was kind of just dormant until you lit that spark. I think that's one of the most underrated things that, you know, professors can give to us.
Yeah, I would say, in my experience, I have one professor right now that does this pretty consistently, but whenever they're noticing kind of an energy dip in the classroom or things are kind of mellowed out, they'll say, like they'll address it, they'll say, okay, I see that everybody's a little bit tired today, see it? And just acknowledging that, kind of having that moment of like, yeah, we are all pretty tired right now, a little bit of a laugh, that kind of picks energy up. And even just acknowledging something kind of takes the power away from it almost. So like, you know, when there's an awkward silence, somebody's like, well, this is an awkward silence, and then it makes it less awkward. So I think just acknowledging things, and then also if you're reading that and the response to that seems like, maybe we should just get up and shake this out a little bit, little brain break, maybe take a 1 minute break if there's time, of course allows that. But just kind of being honest and aware and just addressing it, I think is first and foremost. Students really appreciate when their feelings are addressed, so I'm sure that would be a benefit.
We have a question from the chat. How much of student absenteeism do you think might be a function of generalized anxiety about the future, like climate grief, and how teaching content may not be perceived as offering equipping or navigating a much changed future? So
Impending doom.
yes,
Kids are coming to class, I got it.
thank you.
Yeah, I'll definitely. I'm not too sure about the anxiety of like, oh, well, where is life going for everybody? But I think the biggest reason we're here is to be the change and to step into that role of, you know, turning back the clock and helping with sustainability and, you know, just practicing more, having more green practices and things like that. I think, you know, it takes a passion about that. And not everybody has that, you know, but I don't think the anxiety would be about, you know, 100 years from now or so. I think more the anxiety is like, okay, what does my future look like if I don't pass this class, or I get, you know, this drops my GPA. I think, you know, there's a big anxiety about that with students every day. And, you know, sometimes it's like, well, why even show up if I'm just, you know, if I did bad on this, am I even worth like continuing? Do I even think I can learn this? And I think one thing as professors we can do is like motivate our students and you know, have them understand like, you know, they once struggled once, you know, as students to get to that level. And it has to be at that point, you know, it has to be your students. They have to be those people who leave and take, you know, your jobs and become leaders and things like that. So I think the more we instill positive, kind of like positive vibes in our rooms, and we're supportive of our students and work with them in specific areas that they can, you know, work on. I would love to see, you know, I would love to think that people are going to show up to class more, knowing that they can talk to a teacher who's going to care and show you how to excel.
Yeah, I think quickly adding on to that, just showing students where where the content can be applied to their lives and their careers directly, showing them not only exactly how things are going to be done and how it's going to be applicable and relevant to them, but showing them how they can make that change. So with things like climate anxiety and you know, that can really be applied to all sorts of different disciplines. You know, showing them that they can make a change and that they can bring something valuable to the table, even from an entry-level position, even from day one. And showing them, equipping them with those tools and saying, this is exactly how you're going to bring this and make it valuable. And showing them that they have that power to make change in the organizations that they've been a part of in the future.
I think also going back to the social anxiety aspect of it, we know that just in the population, there's a certain breakdown of people who are introverts, extroverts, introverted extroverts, everywhere in between, right? So I think that thinking back to my undergraduate curriculum, some of the tools we had right around the end of senior year or so, which was back in, I'll date myself to 2012 or so. We PowerPoints and posting slide decks on Moodle after class became a really big thing. And being an upperclassman, playing on the club lacrosse team, why would I go to class, especially if I have social anxiety or it's really early when I know that tomorrow it's just going to be posted online anyway, and I don't really have to engage with anybody because I had 2 a day and I was up till 11 last night, and now I have to wake up for this, you know, 8 a.m. class. I think that the social anxiety, while we're pushing the dial in the right direction in terms of accessibility and making it able for students to still receive the material, perhaps if they can't be there physically, what it has also done is provided for a lot of people who do have social anxiety and not like to say, I don't have to go and engage in this class anymore because I know tomorrow I can reduce my anxiety of having to do that tonight. And I'll just be on there on Moodle in the morning and I can just take my notes and look at it from there. So I think that in unintended ways, we sometimes try to do the best thing and it has unintended consequences. That could be something that people with social anxiety are taking advantage of.
So I think that this is speaking nicely to a question that we had that we somewhat already commented on about how we are sensing, you know, whether it's through absenteeism or low engagement, that something's not connecting with students, whether it's what's going on in the classroom or what's going outside of the classroom. So I'm wondering what insight you have as for why there may be this lack of engagement from students, if it's external factors, internal factors. I mean, I also think of our, especially students who are more of that traditional, less always traditional, but maybe that 18, 19-year-old who are being perceived as the learning loss, which can't be very encouraging to students coming in. So is there anything else you would say as to, you know, insight as to where this lack of engagement is coming from? And what might help?
Yeah, I'll go and jump in here. I think, so part of the reason why I founded the task force in the first place, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is I noticed that there was kind of this academic culture that had developed, that the priority was checking the boxes and getting your degree, not on the learning. And that's from a student perspective, and I feel like also a faculty plays a role in that as well. And so with that being said, it doesn't matter if I learn this, I'll just use ChatGPT. Obviously cheating is rampant, it's super easy. And if people don't actually care about learning, then, you know, it just makes the most sense to cheat. And so I think that's been one thing that we've been really trying to tackle is how can we fix that academic culture? So all of a sudden, the priority is on the learning instead of the grades and the degree, because obviously that's the whole reason you should want the degree. And as far as how to address that, I think that just goes back to getting students to connect with the material and getting students to care about what they're learning. And I think one thing that we talked about is simply, all faculty are, coming from working in the field, and students want to hear about that. And so I think that, faculty telling stories about their life and their careers, that really goes a long way in making what you're learning real. So it's not just some calculus concept that nobody's ever going to use. All of a sudden it's, oh, my professor actually did use this. And that's kind of interesting. It invites students to, ask further questions after class, build that rapport, so that it's, not so much on the professors to do everything.
I also see students as kind of a microcosm of our society. I mean, we're talking about a certain age group or people who were socialized during a certain era. But I think it's indicative of a larger societal issue that we have, and it's not America with a sociology background that speak to this a bit too. But we just live in an era, a culture of distraction now. And if you think of RAM running like a computer in the background, and you're running, 15 tabs open and you're running 4 different software, the computer starts slowing down. And I liken that to the way that our brains think in the modern era, because we're never present, even if we're in class physically. Maybe people aren't engaging because it's hard to turn off. Now I'm typing on here and the iMessage pops up, and I thought I put that on silent. Now my watch is going off. The fridge is going to yell at me in a minute. And it's like there's something going on all the time. So it's just hard to be present in the moment. So even though this isn't necessarily relevant to absenteeism, but even when people are there, they're not engaged because they're not really there. They're running too much. They got too many tabs open. They're trying to think of all these different things that's going on. And so it's hard to engage and think, oh, what was the question? Or I should raise my hand. I missed it. I'm a moment behind because this email came through or something, And Christina, she comes and she does some professional development with us in the Writing Center just about every year now about task management and being present and figuring out how to, turn off things when you need to be quiet and literally absorb what's being said to you. And I think that, again, students do it, but we do it too as adults. And it's just it's a larger social issue, I think, more broadly. I don't know how we get past that. But again, going back to the impending doom, I'm not offering a lot of insight about how to fix that problem. But it's not unique to Oakland. It's not unique to these. I think it's just part of a larger social issue.
So a couple of the things that are coming up on the chat kind of get at one of the harder parts for faculty when dealing with this idea of engagement, because at times to provide some of that engagement, it requires time and energy to put together really useful case studies or material to go through. And how do students then feel if then to do that and to be engaged in the classroom, that maybe some of the other learning has to occur outside of class? So there's sometimes, I think, is a disconnect between expectations when those types of learning tools are employed. And so as this individual says, it talks about it's hard to drive to campus if they're not going to be provided with the same level. It's coming from the PowerPoints and there's no student involvement. And then you've got a single class, or you have a single case study that you're working on. So how do we sort of rationalize those types of choices and what students need?
Yeah, I think making the in-class or in-person or online experience something unique that they can't get offline. And so, whether that's posting some of your lectures ahead of time so students can watch that and come prepared to class, or giving these specific readings to talk about during class that are then your activities are based off of. I think kind of having a little bit of that flipped classroom approach, even if it's not fully, I think that gives students an incentive to show up, because if they don't, then they're missing out on that experience. And, that's extremely like community building too. So when you have that community aspect and accountability, there's a reason to go, because if you don't, then people are going to be missing you and noticing that you're gone. And also you're just not getting that same learning experience. And so something we've talked about in our task force meetings is that if students, when they show up, if they're given information that is helpful to them that can be applied later, whether it's through exams or assessments in that kind of way, information that they can't necessarily get if they don't come. That can be a really good incentive to get them to go without making a strict attendance requirement that's just kind of arbitrary, like, did you show up, did you not? Because there's a difference between being in a seat and being there up here. And so kind of making those incentives not necessarily by points or by requirements, but rather by access to information in 2 ways, I think is really valuable.
To also go off of that, I think that the way I see textbook resources, because a lot of the PowerPoints just come straight from the textbook companies, is secondary resources. Because I know a lot of times, in plenty of my classes, I read the PowerPoints and I just get nothing from it. A lot of times it's very, it can be in more sophisticated language. And I think, that a lot of students share that sentiment that it's just harder to get something off of it. So I think that if the professors are kind of using that as a secondary resource, and it doesn't have to be one or the other, that they're either using the PowerPoints or they're using real life examples, that of course there's ways in which you can lecture that, you're combining them. Or maybe you recognize that, hey, this is the textbook definition. Let's kind of break that down. Like talk with a partner about what you think it means. That, using things like that doesn't really add much more work for the professor. But still gets people thinking and kind of takes the emphasis away from, oh, well, I didn't understand the PowerPoint. Let me read the textbook. Oh, wait, that's the same wording. Well, let me ask my professor. Oh, they copied and pasted from the PowerPoint.
I do see a lot of, in the graduate level, a lot of folks, and of course, we know graduate students have different stressors, different external things that are motivating them. Typically a little bit older, maybe have families, things like that. That it's this very statement here. It's not worth my time to drive to campus. I have 2 kids and a dog at home. That's what I create all day. It's just a different lifestyle when you're that age. And so all my courses, almost all my courses have been offered high flex. But the difference is that graduate students, I always say, I did my undergrad for my parents, and I did my graduate studies for me, what I was interested in. Typically by the graduate level, you're studying what you want to be studying. So there's a little bit more motivation to want to be there, but also the classes are smaller, like I alluded to. Obviously, you guys know the classes are smaller. We'll go more notice if you're not there, but we still have a hard time getting people to come physically. The difference is there's the self-motivation to be engaged, and I think back to the first class I had, our kind of introductory colloquium class for my doctoral program, and our class chat group that we got put in for that first semester. We're all still friends. We all still go to dinner. We haven't had classes together in a few semesters, but that was something, and here's the kicker. It was completely online. It was in the fall of 2020. We never met each other. I actually just met these women, and they saw how short I was when I stood up and I wasn't behind a screen for the first time in February. But we go out to dinner, we talk, we still stayed in touch with each other. It's different though with undergrads because you have a lot of the survey classes, the prerequisite courses. It's not something they're inherently interested in. So that's where we see some of these issues. One thing that we talked about collectively though in the task force was I had a professor, Dr. Troxel Smith. She had the PowerPoints, and sometimes that's the best delivery, right? For the biggest bang for your buck. You can get a lot delivered through PowerPoint lecture. But like every other word, there was a blank you had to fill in. So you actually had to pay attention and listen to what she was saying. And we rely so wholeheartedly on PowerPoint, we forget that it was what it was invented for. It's a slide deck tool to supplement what you're saying. That's supposed to be putting paragraphs up on a PowerPoint. It's supposed to be supplementing what you're delivering. So I thought that was cool when Dr. Troxel Smith did that, because like, oh, it's kind of rudimentary, kind of reminds me of elementary school, fill in the blank, but guess what? It worked, didn't it? It got me to pay attention, and it got me to, it helped me because I knew if I got logged on later and went to pull up the PowerPoint, it would have been helpful, but it wasn't going to be all filled in. I missed a lot of the key information or what she was trying to get communicated through that specific slide. So that was something that worked, and I think we had agreed that we had a couple other professors who did that too. That's helpful, even if it is from the publisher of the textbook. You can always make a copy, duplicate it, and go through and leave a couple blanks just to let people know, hey, I'm not paying attention. It's going to be blank. I don't know what that was.
Are there any other questions in the room? Before we go to our last question?
We have one from online soon.
Okay, go ahead, and then we'll do your one.
Can we've been talking about PowerPoints. I'm a history professor. I'd like to think that I'm engaging in the classroom, and I actually hate PowerPoint. I use it all of the time, and I use it because I think students expect it to be there. I don't write paragraphs, you know, I do, and I explicitly say at the beginning of the semester and at each class, like, listen to the words coming out. Not just the 5, you know, words that are on the board. And so obviously, you know, this is for people, but I'm kind of curious, like, did I get, you know, like, would students be more interested if I just scrapped it and went back to chalk and the blackboard and my theatrics in the classroom? I'm curious. I mean, I still try to, you know, again, be engaging them, but I do it solely because I think my students will be angry and demand it if I don't, not because I actually find it a particularly helpful teaching tool. In fact, this semester, and like my students are really engaged, we did a reacting to the past game for the most part, but I noticed that students are not taking notes at all in my upper division history class because they have a PowerPoint with 5 words on it. And I'm thinking, you can't understand the Italian Renaissance just through these 5 words. So I'm just curious to people's thoughts.
And to follow up on this, I write things on the board all the time, and then I will look out and I'll say, this isn't in the textbook, this isn't anywhere, and then students will take pictures.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And so-
Yeah.
And you know, and I said, well, this is a totally different, you might not have done this before, but you know, the writing and the drawing can be really useful. And at the end of the semester, students will say, oh, wow, that was really helpful, but it took the whole semester to get there. So I think this is a question a lot of us have then is, how do we talk to students about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good opportunity to get student feedback just in your classes and just, you know, throw, you know, one question Google form or something in an email and say like, hey, how would you feel if, you know, I went without PowerPoint this class? And, you know, I think that one of the big things that I advocate for is transparency in the classroom. And so like I noticed, like one of my professors, she uses involuntary questions. And based on my experience talking with other students, lots of students don't like that because it makes them feel anxious. But she's got like 4.9 stars or something on Rate My Professor. And it's because of her delivery. When she does it, she's like, hey, I know you guys are gonna hate me, but like, you gotta learn. And so people don't mind it. And so I think that it's all in the delivery, that it's like, if you make the students feel like they're a part of, you know, how they're learning, that it's like, oh, well, I guess I haven't really thought about that. Okay, yeah, I'd be interested in trying that once, and just kind of making students feel like they're a part of the process. I would have a feeling that a lot of them would be like, yeah, let's try it.
I would say, especially kind of speaking back to the point about new students not being prepared for college level courses. I would say that handwriting out notes is it's an immensely helpful resource to them, even though it doesn't seem like much, but just showing them exactly how to take those notes. And of course, what you're actually writing isn't necessarily the notes they should be taking, but I think giving them the time to write with you and kind of follow along on the material, like holding the hand just a little bit. I personally love that because it doesn't make me feel rushed to just, oh, let me look at the PowerPoint, write down all the words exactly, and I'm not listening. But if the professor is writing along with us, that allows me to kind of tune into more of what they're saying and, you know, having that time to write out exactly and organize it as they're presenting.
And we always get stuck in this kind of reductionist thinking where we boil everything down and make it an either or option, right? And I typically, I know that I heard that, like, well, should I just do PowerPoint or do this? But instead, I would challenge you to think of more of a both and approach, where we can use PowerPoint as a tool to deliver more engaging things. For example, I have a professor who uses the PowerPoint just to show images or to show the QR code to get on poll everywhere, or to show the QR code to get onto the Jamboard. Or to, so it's like it's a tool where I can put that up on the board, and we know the students can take out their picture, their phone, take a picture, but now they can scan a QR code, and now it's an engaging Mentimeter where we're all putting our input in, or you know, when I saw this image, what did it elicit? If we're thinking about implicit bias or something like that. So don't just think it as a tool of delivery for lecture notes, but also it could be a tool to facilitate other types of engaging activities through some of the technology we have now, like Poll Everywhere or anywhere, where it's Mentimeter, Jamboard, some of those other things that we can real quick, boom, put the phone and then get right on and be participating in it.
So I know Dan Arnold had a hand up a while ago. I'm not sure if he gave up. Dan, are you there? maybe not. If we have somebody. We have some. Okay, so we have some great questions in the chat. If we can scroll up a tiny bit, Mona. And maybe we'll just, you can respond to what you want to. There we go. It's just Stephanie has kind of 3 questions there, so maybe we'll just go at them as whatever inspires you. How do students feel about math classes? What can we do to get students to ask more questions? And how do you motivate them to go to office hours? And how can we motivate them to do homework? So it's a 4 questions. So maybe if one of these is really striking you, feel free to answer it.
I'm gonna go back to my courses on organizational psychology and what we know to be true about motivation. And one thing that we know demotivates people is change, right? If there's lots of changes, going back to what Lance was saying about transparency, candor, and having kind of like an agenda for what to expect for the class. When things change a lot, that people get all, cortisol gets released, and now we're all clammed up and there's changes and we're not feeling good about that. So keeping a consistent and transparent schedule that is that people can understand what to expect when they come to the class. I am not a mathematician, so I was a person who was in junior year of high school saying, Mrs. Oliveira in math class, I'm never going to use this in my life. And I haven't actually. I'm gonna get a PhD. Yeah, I haven't been saying it back ultimately too. I hate to put this out there, but one of the things that we know is there's external motivation, right? Oh, you don't get these points if you don't do this, but those are transactional nature. If we want people to be motivated intrinsically to want to do something, maybe going back to that idea of social anxiety, especially in larger classes like lectures or so, we make question asking anonymity. If I can ask a question, but I don't have to raise my hand and have the question attached to me as a person, I can get on the Jamboard and type it up there and it's anonymous and it's just a unique identifier. It's not attached to my name. Maybe I would be more motivated to ask those questions, or knowing that office hours can be remote and I could get on, or just making it more accessible for people. Anonymity, I think is a big one for sure. Anonymity, being able to ask questions and be anonymous and asking them, and then everyone benefits from the response.
To speak a bit to the office hours question, building that rapport, Lance always thinks of rapport and I love it, but building that rapport and personal relationship with your students, I think is extremely important, and encouraging them to come see you, and ask questions, whether it's in class, out of class, during office hours. Just knowing that you're accessible and that you truly are showing that care for them. And then also something I want to bring up as like a point to speak to a report that I don't want to forget about is that it's really important that you're making sure that your efforts to build rapport in your students or in your classrooms are inclusive, because oftentimes, at least in my experience as a student in the business school, my classes were pretty male dominated, and so I know that in specific classrooms, especially with male professors, they would connect very well with the other male students in the classroom. And, that was all great and beneficial. And they would connect on different aspects of life, things going on, and especially with sports games and sports examples within class, and outside of that as well. But I felt that as a student in that classroom, as somebody who didn't personally relate to that, not only did I not feel a connection with my professor, but I felt hurt and I felt excluded, even though it wasn't on purpose. Of course, nobody's going to be like, okay, I'm only going to talk to the male students. No one's saying that. But I think making that active effort to include all students and make sure that, hey, if I have this personal relationship on this basis with this student, making sure I'm going out of my way to create other relationships with every student in that class when possible. And obviously it's not going to be possible to have a one-on-one relationship with every single student you have. No one's asking that. But I think just making sure that students feel actively included in your class instead of just passively excluded.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know math is probably the hardest thing to motivate people to do. Because you do have your audience of people who are motivated, like that their thing is math. But outside of that, a lot of people kind of see it as a step towards where they need to be rather than something they need to learn. And a good idea to get people to ask more questions in math is to, I don't know. I know we have these schedules that are jam-packed and we don't really have a lot of time to, go off and have conversations about this for a long time, but some things I had witnessed personally was just if we could make our students feel more comfortable asking questions, and a lot of times I witness like, I've had a question and like it's almost like, your professor's in a rush, and sometimes I'll have my hand up, they'll kind of half scan and then move on, and it's like, okay, well then the more it happens in class, the more I feel less motivated to ask. It's like, well, you clearly have somewhere to be, so like I'm not gonna interrupt you, and it's definitely something that could be frustrating. And speaking back to what we talked about recently, like when these things add up and you had this one little area in math, because math, you get one thing wrong and the whole thing is wrong. So when you have these little gaps and holes in your education, especially with math, and they don't ask those questions, and they go on thinking that they understand it, they end up getting, they feel like they don't know anything. And so why even ask if I don't know this, or this? And then why even show up to class if I'm getting 50s and 60s on my exams, because I try so hard and it feels like I don't know anything, so I definitely think just inspiring them to like how do we feel about this class? And like just kind of identifying hard steps or individual things that could be challenging for students, and just really taking your time with that. Or if you can kind of sense it in a way, if someone doesn't understand it, like the class doesn't just reiterate it, that's okay too. But then again, like I said, I know how hard it is with the jam-packed schedules. Like, I mean, it's just like this, you don't really have time to not, like to stop and just talk for a while. But I think it's very important that they would retain most of it. So.
Yeah, but I think a great strategy with especially math problems and anything like that where you're walking through an exercise together is just frequently checking it. So you do a couple steps and say, okay, are we good? And just making sure we're reading the room and you're not losing people, because if you lose people around step 3, they are gone. They are not even in the same classroom as you by step 8. So it's just making sure you don't lose people in the middle of the problem, because once I think, oh no, I've lost it, or I'm not exactly sure where we got that. If I get to that headspace and we're already on the next step, I'm not going to do the rest of it because I don't know what we're doing. And so just really making sure step by step, doing a couple problems like that, and then you can kind of speed up and go through and say, if you have any questions, have a name, independently work. But I think checking in and making sure in those, especially in those initial first example problems, making sure you're not losing students right away.
A lot of graduate degrees that are terminal degrees, if you don't get it right this chance, you're not going to get it right. This is it. This is a terminal degree. You got to have it this time. And so I see that a lot in my doctoral level classes, where it's just a much more inviting environment to ask questions and see clarification, because the professor is right up front, like, hey, this is your last chance to get this concept. Like, your doctoral student, once you have a PhD after your name, or JD or MD or DO or whatever your professional degree is in a terminal way, then we're failing you as an institution. We didn't teach you this, and you're supposed to know this. So I do hear that rhetoric a little bit more at the graduate level. I'm assuming you guys don't at the undergraduate level, but just the candor of saying, look, if you don't know it at this point, we got to make sure you do.
So we are at about time. So as just a closing comment, and then I'll leave it to you if there's anything you really want to say in 30 seconds or less. But we will be following up with an email, and since we didn't really get to our last question about where we'd like to go from here, what kind of dialogue we think students and professors should be having continually, I'll create probably a 1-question survey to sort of gather kind of what we'd like to see next, whether we should have this type of thing every semester. Other things where we can keep this collaboration and dialogue going. So I think we'll follow up with that and make the results so everyone can see them, and that becomes more and more next. But I just wanted to leave the last closing moments to you. Is there anything else you wanted to share or say?
Yeah, I will say one quick closing thought. I really appreciate everybody that came today. It means a lot to have, I mean, I was thinking maybe 20, and so the fact that we had double that, close to 50 is amazing. My only closing thought and kind of response to that, is, obviously this isn't just one day that we did this one event and it happened. It's not about checking off the boxes. It's a continual process that, you know, I want to be a part of as much as I can. I understand that part of that is talking to administration. So from an admin point of view, that, you know, putting in the work to try and make your class, you know, kind of continually improving is rewarded. And so I look forward to continue working with all of you, and I appreciate you being here.
I was just gonna say, we didn't have a ton of time to get into the numbers, but as Lance mentioned at the beginning, we had a wonderful sample size. We have plenty to run parametric tests, look at some relationships between those variables. You know, a little bit biased because it was a convenient sample, but I would hope that we could share some more outcomes and findings from those numbers that Lance was able to really round up quite a few. I know my graduate counterparts like, he got how many and how long? What? How did he do that? You know, but you know, diligence and hard work. And so, you know, I would say, let's stay in contact about communicating some of those findings as we get into the numbers a little bit more.
Oh, trust me, I've been telling Lance, like, you need to share out more of this.
Yeah.
We did have one other question on that point, which has to do with the sampling using Snapchat and approaching students at the OC and what type of, if any, bias that might introduce into the results based on the fact that maybe those are more outgoing students or maybe it's a particular population. So I think those are. Yeah, so those are some distractions about.
Because Instagram's not,
Yeah.
and social media things while in class, and they're like, oh, I got this, oh, and I heard that, so they may.
He also
Be more savvy.
got QR code flyer and put it all around. I know you guys had it stamped at OSI. They were in all the buildings. Terry let us post them all over the writing center. We had them there on the tables, and I'm sure that helped a little bit as well. But yeah, obviously a bias there. Can't ignore that, but still a lot of numbers there to work with.
It's great, it's great, and hopefully you see all the wonderful comments up on the chat. So thank you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.